there, welcome back to Elite Literary Book Group. I'm Rachel Beck, and I'm going to go over Chapter 9 today of To Kill a Mockingbird. But before I do that, I just want to read this short little poem to you to sort of preface the lecture. So this is by County Cullen, and it's called Incident. Once riding in old Baltimore, heart filled, head filled with glee, I saw a Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. Now I was 8 and very small, and he was no whit bigger, and so I smiled, but he poked out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until December. Of all the things that happened there, that's all I can remember. So, obviously this poem is about racism, but it's also a coming of age. And when you read a poem, at first the title probably doesn't mean, and it really shouldn't mean anything to you. But then after you read it, go back and look at the title again and think about the significance of the title. Once you understand it, and this is not hard to understand, this makes students just freeze. They go, oh. And it's the power of the language that, suddenly he has this kind of sing-song tone, child innocence, wonder. He's going to go travel. He's going to go somewhere he's never been. And then this happens. And notice the title is just called Incident. The title Incident is just what it sounds like. It's just something that's actually a minor thing. A very small thing. And yet it's a haunting thing for him. I mean, after everything that goes on, all the good things that probably happened, that's what he remembers. And that's the psychological process of coming of age. It's not the good things that happen to us that we later recall and think this is when I changed, or this is when I saw the world differently. It's always the bad things that's part of growing up. So following that, I just want to read this one part of a letter from a Birmingham jail from Martin Luther King. Now, to preface this, he was in jail when he wrote this. And a lot of people know Martin Luther King as an activist, but they don't really talk about him the way that they should as a writer. He's an excellent writer. Was an excellent writer. And, I mentioned something last time about the power that you have when you know how to communicate. You can really make change because the person who is more well-spoken is generally the leader, the one who's going to lead. So given his background, which was very literary, that's really what made him who he is. Oprah would tell you the same thing. She would say it was really because she loved to read that she was able to communicate and then able to get in places that other people couldn't get. So this is the reason I do this. Okay. So he's addressing people who say, okay, we understand you want civil rights and you want these changes and stuff, but it's not time. It's so inconvenient for us. Could you please just wait a little bit more? And so his response is he keeps rhetorically going back to why they can't wait for it. He says, we have waited more than 340 years for our God-given and constitutional rights. This is also during time Jim Crow. So, they weren't able to go into the same places. It was segregation, okay? The nations of Asia and Africa are moving with jet-like speed towards the goal of political independence, and we still creep at a horse and buggy pace towards gaining a cup of coffee at a lunch counter. I guess it's easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say, wait. But when you've seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will and drown your sisters and brothers at whim, when you've seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, brutalize, and even kill your black brothers and sisters with impunity, when you've seen a vast majority of 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of affluent society. When you finally find yourself, you find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she cannot go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and see tears welling up in her little eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children, and see depressing clouds of inferiority begin to form in her little mental sky, and see her begin to distort her little personality by unconsciously developing a bitterness towards white people. When you have to concoct an answer for your 5-year-old son, asking in agonizing pathos, "Daddy, why do white people treat colored people so mean?" When you take a cross-country drive and find it necessary to sleep night after night in uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you. When you are reading white and colored, when your first name becomes nigger and your middle name becomes boy, however old you are, your last name becomes John. And when your wife and mother are never given the respected title of Mrs. When you are harried by day and haunted by night by the fact that you are a Negro living constantly at a tiptoe stance and never knowing what to expect next, and plagued with inner fears and outer resentments, when you are forever fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness, then you will understand why it's difficult to wait. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over and men are no longer willing to be plunged into an abyss of injustice. Okay, so if you look at this from a literary perspective, the way that he uses the language, the sounds, the rhythm, the pathos of his children, you know, people can, they may not care about you, but they may have children of their own. And so he's trying to find any connection, right? In the beginning of the letter, you know, he brings up the Apostle Paul. I'm doing just like the Apostle Paul. Now, he's addressing other ministers, and he's a minister too. In fact, he titles it, "My Fellow Clergymen," meaning I'm one of you. But, you know, this description of his daughter about these clouds of inferiority distorting her mental sky. It's just such a great metaphor for what a potential a child has, and then to distort it, for her to lose her innocence in people, and to see the world as a bitter place that doesn't want her. You see what's going to happen psychologically to these children. And Martin Luther King knows this. And so he doesn't want her to have this unconscious bitterness towards white people, but it's inevitable. It's going to happen. So again, he's talking about also what County Cullen is talking about here's this word, and it's causing a degenerating sense of nobodiness. And if you think about that line, and you think about something like Black Lives Matter, you could see, you know, where it comes from, where it's in, whether you agree with it or not, you can see where this is going from a degenerating sense of nobodiness to, hey, we matter. Okay? So I just wanted to point that out, because when either you're teaching To Kill a Mockingbird or you're reading it, you know, one of the big controversies, of course, is the language. And there's no real way to get around it, because if you do that, if you don't study literature, for instance, American literature, I don't know what American story you're going to study that doesn't address these issues. It seems to me that people are missing the forest for the trees, because on one hand you want to talk about it, but on the other hand you don't want anybody to get offended or feel uncomfortable. education has no way around that. If you really are going to be educated, you have to know, and you have to care, and no theory is going to make you care. The only thing that's going to change people's hearts is a story, and that's why people wrote stories. I have a blog below about why we should teach Huckleberry Finn, and I don't know if any districts anymore touch that book, but it's worth looking at, because in reality, what Mark Twain was trying to do was to humanize this slave. Huck and Jim are friends, and at the end, Huck has a moral choice. Either he's going to turn Jim in. Now, he's been raised that that's what Christians do, okay? Or he's going to risk going to hell and be with protect his friend, and he chooses to protect his friend. And this is a kind of situation that makes you have to go deep into your own integrity and courage. Why would it be racist to teach that? These people are totally missing the point on this. And so now the argument is, well, we teach this, don't teach this theory, right? And then, okay, then don't talk about it. And the way to solve it is just to let people read the story and come to their own conclusions about what to think. Let the story do it. You don't have to do it for students. You don't have to tell people what to think. They will feel differently. I had a group of students one time, they were just, I don't know why, but just completely callous about the Jewish culture and Jews, and would always like make fun of each other or call each other a Jew or something like that. I mean, they were just doing this, and I realized they'd learned about the Holocaust in history, but they'd never read a story like Night. They've never been in someone else's shoes. They don't know the seriousness of this. That's scary. That's so sad. And that's the thing. I mean, if we want change to happen, if we want to help people be more understanding, then we have to go there. In Their Eyes Are Watching God, she says, you got to go there to know there. And that's the way it is. So Scout in chapter 9 is dealing with the fact that people are making fun of her because her father is defending Tom Robinson. And so she asks her dad, Atticus, do you defend niggers? And he tells her not to say this word because he says it's common. And I think it's a good point also. The people who do use this word are the way lower class. And I think when you see people who are into white supremacy and stuff like that, they typically are very ignorant people. So why would they want to be that way? I think because they need to feel superior to somebody. Why else? The ego always wants to feel superior. So they find a way to feel superior. Now, if you're at a higher level, and there is a class structure in this book, like Atticus, and you have humility, you don't need to feel superior. You don't need to put other people down so you can feel better about yourself. But there are certain people who do need to do that because they're so identified with their ego. They have no earthly idea who they are. And they think it's all in terms of superiority. And they feel like they're nobody. So, now Atticus has to approach this as, okay, so the town people say it's wrong. But I couldn't personally go to church, and I couldn't tell you or Jim what to do anymore if I didn't defend him. If I didn't follow my heart and do what I consciously know is right, is what he's saying. Then how can I tell you to do something that's right? You know, if you lie to your kids, you can't expect them not to lie. If you do something wrong and you justify it, well, they will too. But if you know, like what someone else had said before, like he knew God was watching, you know, and when you have a real feeling of commitment to God, I don't think you can lie. I think it's actually very difficult. So here we are again, what society wants and what you know is right. And that's a choice that everybody has to make on some level at some point in your life. Even Joseph Campbell says it's either whether you're going to say yes to the servant or no to the servant. Are you going to risk losing your job, losing your reputation to tell the truth, to do the right thing? Or are you going to be safe and secure like everybody else? So these are the tough questions that we all face, and that she's going to have to face too. She's going to have to learn to be above this. And Atticus is very forgiving about this. He said, you know, when they bring up the war, he says, you know, except this time we're not fighting the Yankees, we're fighting our friends. And they're still our friends. And so, you know, if you think about that in relevant terms today about, you know, very divisive country, they are still our friends is really a hard thing for some people to say. And Atticus is very humble about other people not understanding. In the If poem, which I'll sometime show you, it says, trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowances for their doubting too. Meaning, you don't all have to go along with me on this. I'll still be okay. What I won't be okay is if I don't follow my conscience. Then I'm going to have to pay. And I don't want to have to pay for something that could be spiritually damaging. I'd much rather just piss the neighbors off. And why are they so upset? If it were two black men arguing in court, wouldn't be a problem. But Bob Ewell is white, and we already know the Ewells because of Burris Ewell. It's Ewell's daughter, Mayella, who you will meet in court, who's accusing Tom Robinson of rape. It's, to the people, it's a black man against a white man. So obviously, the black man's guilty. Now, Atticus knows how people think. So when Scout asks him, are we going to win? Atticus says, no, we're not. Because he knows the jurors, he knows how people are. And he knows Tom Robinson is innocent. You will too when you read the case. But how can you change these conditions and this belief system in these other people? And things do change, okay? But how do they change? You typically change from people who have the courage to write books like this. And then we have people in higher level education saying, we shouldn't do that. You know, you're really making it difficult for others to learn and understand and have empathy if you don't teach these books. And so what also happens is they go back to the Finch Landing place where they go every year for Christmas. And we meet Aunt Alexandra and Uncle Jack. And Uncle Jack is someone Scout really loves. Aunt Alexandra, not so much. I mean, she sort of loves her, but she says Aunt Alexandra was fanatical on the subject of my attire. I could not possibly hope to be a lady if I wore breeches. When I said I could do nothing in a dress, she said I wasn't supposed to be doing things that required pants. And she says, furthermore, I was supposed to be a ray of sunshine in my father's life. And she said, I suggested that one could be a ray of sunshine in pants just as well, but Auntie said that one had to behave like a sunbeam. So you get that. Now, Uncle Jack is cooler. He gets some of those air rifles, which Atticus is not real interested in. And you'll see later that Atticus has these traits that aren't the father-type traits that the kids want. course, he's got something that they really need. But you'll see that kind of comes around later. So she gets into sort of the same thing with Cecil, I guess her cousin. And Jack doesn't, she gets into a fight. Jack doesn't understand what happened. And he immediately blames Scout. Now, this is typical of kids, because this always happens. That the kid who's always in trouble is usually the first kid you look at when there's trouble. And she explains to him that, you know, Atticus always at least listens to us. So Jack apologizes because he spanked her or whatever. But this is back when you could spank other people's kids. Can't really do that anymore. This is very interesting, this conversation that the brothers have. So Jack and Atticus are alone. They're kind of talking about what happened with Scout. And Atticus says something about the case. And he says that the judge, and this is very interesting information, Judge Taylor pointed at me and said, "You're it." Now, why? Why would Judge Taylor pick the best lawyer for Tom Robinson? That doesn't seem to make any sense, but he does. And the response to that is his brother says, let this cup pass from you, eh? Which is an allusion to Christ, okay? Because Christ asks for this cup to be, if it is your will, take this cup, this burden away from me. And the truth is he has to do it because no one else can. And it's the same thing with Atticus, that there, and Monty tries to explain this to Scout later, that there's just certain people who have to do these kind of jobs, the hard jobs. And your father's one of them. And so in a way, this is sort of like, almost like messianic symbolism of Atticus as almost a martyr going into this. Not that he's going to die, but, you know, it's in literary terms, when you talk about it figuratively, you could expound on that point if you were writing an essay about this. And it's something that a lot of people miss, but this is why allusions are important. And furthermore, why reading the Bible is important even if you don't believe a word of it. And because in the West, it just, especially with literature or philosophy, it just keeps coming up. To even understand America and their biblical consciousness, you have to kind of understand where we came from and from that perspective. So I think that's, I'll go into, I'll describe Aunt Alexandra later, because she kind of comes up here and then she doesn't, but I do want to say that I want to write a blog or discuss Go Set a Watchman, and I'll tell you that the exact verbatim paragraph about Aunt Alexandra is in Go Set a Watchman. Verbatim, the whole paragraph. Why would an author do that? She certainly wouldn't do it on purpose. So all this talk about Go Set a Watchman is probably moot, because it looks like it was just a first draft of To Kill a Mockingbird. And this is a work of revision. It took Harper Lee 10 years. And I think what happened was, you know, the trial is sort of mentioned in Go Set a Watchman, but an editor looked at that and said, this is the story. And to make it a great American story, let's have it placed when you and Jim are kids. Okay? But, you know, if you're interested in that, I will probably just write a blog about it and explain it. All right, well, thanks for listening today. Thank you.